Tetris is a game that I'm sure all of you have heard of at some point. Maybe not played, but definitely heard of. Now, I can say as of writing the script that I'm borderline addicted to this little block game, but for the longest time, I thought it was a little ridiculous. My father had always told me stories of him and his friends playing Tetris until the early hours of the morning, and I gave Tetris a shot once or twice, but I just couldn't get into it. That is, until I tried Tetris Effect. I'll be honest, I can't remember exactly how I learned of this game, but I decided to take a leap of faith of sorts and give it a shot because the trailer showed me some awesome visuals. Tetris Effect has served as a bit of a gateway drug that lured me in with its particle effects and beautiful scenery, only to get me hooked on its intoxicating gameplay and leave me, much like my father, clearing lines up until the early hours of the morning. Just in case some of you don't know what Tetris is a very simple game. You have a series of 4 blocks that show up in 7 different combinations. The combinations are called tetraminos. If a line of tetraminos is created, that line will disappear. Certain combinations and setups can lead you to getting up to 4 lines cleared with the drop of only 1 piece, and this is called a Tetris. The faster you go and the more lines you clear, the higher your score gets. It's as simple as that, and I'm sure that sounds boring, but it's not, I swear. I think the thing that might make it seem boring is that, for myself at least, Tetris is quite boring to watch. I never had much of a reason to really get into it because simply seeing a line disappear wasn't rewarding enough to keep me engaged, and I found myself struggling in most cases to simply race myself and compete against myself for a new personal high score. Although, what the hell is the Tetris Effect? Essentially, the Tetris Effect is a phenomenon also known as Tetris syndrome that describes an event in which someone devotes so much time into an activity that it changes the way you perceive your surroundings, and it can even alter the way that you think. These thoughts can be obsessive, and individuals have claimed that they can't even prevent such thoughts. Some even see it in their dreams, leading to higher brain activity and a poor rest, despite how much time you spend in bed. Now, this Tetris Effect is not exclusive to the game, as any activity can cause you to experience similar symptoms. To give an example that puzzle game fans may relate to is The Witness. The Witness sees you connecting these line puzzles, and as the game goes on, you eventually start drawing these puzzles in the environment. Some have reported that they saw the world differently after playing the game. See that spoon? Doesn't it remind you of a potential line puzzle? In the case of Tetris, you see my shelf that I have here? No. That to me looks like a mighty fine long piece. To give an example and a personal anecdote that isn't video game related, I can discuss my job. Before a certain virus gave me the opportunity to do YouTube full-time, I was a cashier. I would spend 8 hours a day every other day just scanning items. Because I had to do something to pass the time, I would try and scan as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and I took pride in this. I enjoyed being able to rip through orders, and because I did it for so long, I started dreaming about it. I would get home from a long 8-hour shift only to hit the sack right away, and in my dreams, I was back at the store. Now, for me, this wasn't very pleasant because, well, it was work. But nonetheless, this is an example of the Tetris Effect. I was performing this activity so much and putting such a large amount of time and energy into it that I was always subconsciously thinking about it. Now, discussing it makes it seem like I'm a little crazy, and I understand that, but that's why the Tetris Effect is so interesting to me. It's a change in perspective. Like when you learn a magic trick for the first time. Learning how certain sleight of hand maneuvers work will lead you to looking at magic in a completely different way. There's a progression in this perspective change as you continue slaving away at whatever activity you set your eyes on. The earliest use of the word from my research dates back to 1994, when Tetris was at its peak. It was first coined in an article written by Jeffrey Goldsmith titled, "This is Your Brain on Tetris." And this article is a wonderful read as it recounts the author's own experience with the Tetris Effect and discusses the history of the game. Tetris's addictive nature was present even in its prototype, as its creator, Alexei Pajitnov, could barely pull himself away from the game to finish coding it. I'd like to pull a few sentences from this article as it explains the strange autopilot that your brain goes into and how steep the learning curve is. Hire scanned the brains of Tetris players. In Tetris, Hire sees, quote, a tremendous learning curve. The question became, when the stimuli are faster and the decision-making is harder, does the brain require more energy? Hire found, as he suspected, that the brain requires less energy to play higher levels of Tetris. This difficulty that Hire mentioned is exactly what I experienced when I was in my Tetris peak. Levels on the beginner difficulty stumped me for hours on end because they felt like they simply required too much thought with too little time, and they eventually became levels I could complete on expert difficulty while achieving higher scores and having conversations with people at the same time. These once brain-teasing decisions became trivial as I became more and more enthralled in the game's sprint mode, a mode in which you're tasked with clearing 40 lines as quickly as possible. I found myself having decisions on where blocks were going decided upon before I could completely comprehend exactly what was going on. I felt like a zombie, but I was achieving so much. Even in a game like Puyo Puyo Cross Tetris, where the gameplay is much the same, it gives me the same feeling of Tetris Effect. The gameplay was just as satisfying despite what is, in comparison, the bare minimum when it comes to particle effects and the same old gameplay. This happens because of the progression that comes from playing Tetris Effect. For me, the progression was more than just getting better at the game. It was about the progression in my perspective. I began my first few rounds by fumbling with the controls and making basic structures, typically resulting in towers or just pieces in the wrong spot. By the time I had a few hours in, my decision-making abilities had grown, and I was beginning to clear more and more lines until I cleared my first Tetris. I felt like my senses were heightened and I felt as though I could go on for hours. I wasn't learning tips and tricks for easy scores, I was becoming faster and getting into a flow where I barely even thought about where my next piece would go. I would eventually take the advice that my friend Nam from Nam's Compendium gave me, which was, stop thinking about it. Once I hit that point, I really did stop thinking about where a piece would go next, and for good reason. I was always much better off just going with the flow. This progression from thinking so hard about the placement of each tetramino to eventually not thinking about it at all is what mystified me the most about this hypnotic effect. I think something that is pretty funny about Tetris Effect is the way that the game's most appealing and intriguing aspects become its most dismissible. What initially drew me into Tetris Effect were the pretty visuals and particle effects. It may seem trivial to be intrigued by such materialistic desires, but I had not seen anything like it, and with each trailer I watched, I grew more and more wanting. When I first played, my sense of reward came from the visual and auditory spectacle of having my movements be reflected in the dynamic music, hearing the song and level progress as I clear more lines, and with each line clear seeing a burst of particles and bright lights. It was a shot of dopamine with every line that I cleared, and it's what drove me to improve. It wasn't a matter of getting a high score or clearing lines as fast as possible, but the desire to see what is next. Each level in Tetris Effect paints a lucid picture of a part of the world, ranging from nature, to society, to culture, to beyond our Earth and even beyond our universe. It was a celebration of life, and after completing the game's opening level, The Deep, I began a streak of pleasant surprises which came to a grinding halt once I reached a level titled Ritual Passion. Up to this point, my driving force was the spectacle and the euphoria that came from seeing the levels evolve, and they all had such a wonderful tone to them. The Deep sees you swimming with whales, Pharaoh's Code, Karma Wheel, Jellyfish Chorus, Da Vinci, and Prayer Circles all see you in a bright, bubbly environment where tension isn't quite present. Ritual Passion, however, begins with these demonic statues staring down at you. It begins slowly, allowing you to take your time. By the time you advance to the next stage, a bonfire is lit. As you clear more lines, these astral bodies appear and begin worshipping the fire in the center. Now, despite it being visually intense and sounding like an exorcism is being performed on this incredible electronic track, that's not why I brought it up. I bring it up because for me, it was the first time I entered the zone. I kept bashing my head against this level, which kept increasing its speed to the point where I was just stuck. I wanted to advance, see more, experience more of this game, and more of the high that comes from seeing the wormhole that you enter at the end of the stage. I was forced to move past my analytical mindset and transition into an endless stream of consciousness. I no longer became distracted by the luscious visuals which initially drew my ire, but instead I became obsessed with the satisfaction of clearing a line at such high speeds. Tetris was the fire, and I was the astral body bowing to it. After this point in the game, I stopped caring as much about the visuals and more about the actual gameplay. You may have noticed that with each level change in Tetris Effect, the style of tetraminos changed with it. Some see you using basic squares, while others see you using gears. They function the same, but the reason I bring this up is because like the particles and flashing lights that go off when you clear a line, you begin to not pay much attention to the changes in the tetraminos. It's about the shapes, not what those shapes look like. Even the new quote-unquote zone mechanic feels like a representation of just one aspect of the Tetris effect. The zone ability allows you to enter a slowed down state where all the blocks are highlighted and the backgrounds are minimized. It reflects perfectly what I mentioned before, where as I got more engrossed in the game, it felt like all I could see were the tetraminos. If you've never been in the zone before, I'd say this is an accurate representation of such a feeling. When you do complete the game and are now more interested in the gameplay than its visuals and rely on your own competence in the game for reward, by now you can look at the game's effect modes, which include Marathon and Master Mode, though these don't really offer a ton of replayability. And the lack of an online mode hurts replayability even more. This is why I referred to Tetris Effect as a gateway drug a few minutes ago. It led me in with alluring visuals and auditory light shows, and once it gave me a taste of its addictive gameplay, I was hooked. I transitioned in no time from enjoying what the game allowed me to see and hear to enjoying how the game made me feel. That's why, despite not playing Tetris Effect very much anymore, I appreciate it greatly. This is Tetris for the next generation, and it's such an accessible way to experience a timeless classic. It's truly Tetris like you've never seen it before, making it enjoyable for those that are and are not familiar with the classic puzzle game. It's what starts your addiction, not what sustains it. For me personally, I enjoyed playing something like Puyo Puyo Cross Tetris more, where there's an adventure mode and online competing, and that held me much longer than Tetris Effect. But I don't believe Tetris Effect was supposed to keep you entertained for hours on end. Tetris Effect, as I'm sure you can imagine, is the closest thing we have to witnessing the Tetris Effect in game form. The way the lucid level designs are paired with the psychedelic audio creates a dreamlike state, and I believe that this is intentional, and that this is the developer's take on someone dreaming of Tetris. Real-world settings influence the themes of the levels the same way that our world influences our dreams. That is what I can only assume to be a representation of the Tetris Effect. I want to go back to the article by Jeffrey Goldsmith and pull out another quote, which is as follows. The Tetris Effect is a biochemical reductionist metaphor, if you will, for curiosity, invention, and the creative urge. To fit shapes together is to organize, to build, to make deals, to fix, to understand, to fold sheets. All of our mental activities are analogous, each as potentially addictive as the next. This, to me, perfectly describes how the Tetris Effect relates to the way we perceive reality. Anything could be your Tetris Effect. For some, mountain climbing might be their Tetris Effect. Coding, architecture, it could literally be anything. For myself, it's YouTube. Since I was 11 years old, I've been obsessively creating videos, and as I keep making them, I keep getting better and more efficient. I dream about making videos, and I spend most of my days doing it too. It is an addiction where each completed video bears intoxicating amounts of accomplishment and pride. And I've now passed that point where I see things differently and I look at media, especially online entertainment, with a completely different perspective. That's why I enjoy Tetris Effect so much. It gives you a bite-sized experience of finding that fulfilling addiction and progressing past the point of simply seeing some falling blocks. I realize that it's not about seeing, but feeling, not thinking, but doing, not knowing, but understanding. And that is the Tetris Effect. Okay, howdy. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. This video was short, so I'm going to try and keep the outro short. I just wanted to say that I tried something completely different with this video. I wanted to do something weird, something kind of out of my comfort zone, dip my toes into something a little bit different. So if it's really shit, I'm sorry, but I don't know, I just really like Tetris Effect and I wanted to talk about it. So, yeah, I want to give a shout out to our gold tier patrons. Thank you to AB, Beck, Bossian22, Christopher Moreno, Francis Pop, Predica, Pyrite, Slatty, and for silver tier, I want to say thank you to Dr. Nannard, Jacob Douglas, Chief, and for the bronze, I want to say thank you to Denzel Ritesh and Nathan Figs. I really appreciate the support, guys, especially because on a video like this, it's not Assassin's Creed or Batman, so I don't imagine I'll be getting a lot of views. And it's a shorter video. That's a recipe for disaster. If you do like this video, let me know, because I might do some more stuff. Like, I gotta be honest with you guys, I love puzzle games. But, I love puzzle games, but I don't know how to work it into a video, because I typically just cover, action, adventure, open world games. And so I wouldn't mind branching into something else. If I sound really tired, it's because I'm editing this at 3:30 a.m. Fun fact, I have a terrible time sleeping, and so when I get that burst of inspiration, I typically just get out of bed and get to work. So I just finished editing the video tonight, and yeah, after this, I'm working on this while I work on Infamous 2, because I want to give Infamous 2 all the time it needs to sort of marinate, and I want to make it as good as possible, so I'm working on that right now. Anyways, thank you so much for hanging out. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at ThatBoyAqua. If you want to support me on Patreon or join the Discord server that I have, you can just do all that in the description. I'm also trying to get back into streaming on my second channel on ThatBoyAqua Live, so be on the lookout for that. And yeah, all right. I'll see you guys later. I love you guys. Take care.